So this week for our tip of the week, we're going to talk about how to press without causing any additional shoulder pain if you have some pre-existing issues. A lot of people over the years, if you lift long enough, you start to experience some shoulder issues from excessive pressing, whether it's overhead pressing, whether it's horizontal, whether it's doing dips, whatever it is, eventually you start getting some jamming, some overuse issues. So how do we alleviate that? Well, there are a lot of different ways we can try to, but one of the best ways I found to alleviate any kind of, especially overhead pressing issues, is landmine presses. So a landmine press is actually a really interesting way of kind of circumventing the overhead press or the traditional overhead press issues, which is we are on a fixed plane overhead and we are just jamming up that shoulder joint because either we're in a barbell position, pronated, or we're using dumbbells, but still, again, in that fixed plane where we're just kind of jamming everything up, especially if you're someone who has overhead mobility issues, even like myself. I have some issues with overhead mobility. I can't fully press up and lock out comfortably, so I need a different option for overhead pressing that is not going to be limited by that. Landmine presses are absolutely phenomenal because we're on an arc. So if you have a barbell, you can create this. You can just jam it into a corner and have the same exact effect. Or if you're lucky enough to have an actual landmine attachment that I think, a lot of companies make, but I know Rogue makes it, Elite FTS makes it, I'm sure Sorinex makes it, all those really big brands I'm sure have their own variation of landmine attachments, but you can create that however you want to. Here, get the barbell up to about your chest, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna transition into single arm, keep our hips very square, and we're gonna press. So the thing about this, like what we just talked about, or what I mentioned, it's an arc. So we're not actually pressing in a single plane. This is a multi-plane press. So here, pressing up and out like that, I'm not limited by my overhead mobility because I'm actually able to lean into the movement and adjust based on my own restrictions or own limitations without falling off balance, without dropping the weight on my head, which is amazing for anybody who has pre-existing shoulder issues. So here we're going through the range of motion, we're going through the full movement, very comfortable. Obviously you can add load to this, increase the difficulty, increase the intensity however you need to, but keeping it here, elbow is tight into the torso, it's tucked, so we're keeping a neutral grip. That also takes a lot of pressure off of the shoulder joint. So this is multifaceted. We have an arc, we have that neutral grip press, which is great. We have a nice stable trunk, which can allow us to express even more power up through that press. And for those people who maybe even master the standing landmine press, maybe want something a little bit more challenging, but they're not really ready to go to a standard barbell or dumbbell overhead press, maybe they still have mobility concerns, we can move to a half kneeling landmine press. So the thing here is just making sure that you get your stance, your half kneeling position relatively correct. You can always adjust as needed, but you are going to need to be in a good position here so that you're not leaning back, you're not overarching, you're not falling out of position. So 90 degrees on that back leg, 90 degrees on this front leg. Keep this back glute engaged so that your trunk and your low back are actually very neutral and very stable. From this position, get it up to your shoulder, and we're pressing. And you'll note that this is actually going to be much more difficult than standing overhead pressing, or standing landmine pressing, excuse me, because the angle of the bar is much closer to parallel with the floor. So whenever I'm standing, I'm pressing much closer to a horizontal vector with the barbell. It's going much closer to with gravity rather than against gravity. Here, I'm pressing against gravity because that bar is lower. So this is a progression. Standing landmine presses, a little bit easier, but still a great movement for anybody who has shoulder concerns with overhead pressing or even horizontal pressing.